So it's our pleasure to ask Dr. Coetzee to present the paper today. Please, over to you.
Thank you, René. You can all hear me, correct? Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity and allowing me to share some of the research that my faculty conducted 2 years now. I think this whole COVID thing has knocked our time spans totally out of sync with reality. Just to give a bit of background, late 2018, the dean of our faculty commissioned a task team, or actually several task teams, and one of them was the one that I was asked to chair, which focused on what the impact of the fourth industrial revolution is likely to be on specifically the curricula of degree programs in Economic and Management Sciences. So one must keep in mind that this is now a good 3 years ago. The study was conducted in 2019 and published in a journal, I think it was the beginning of last year, as COVID hit, basically. And so the intention of the paper, of the study, was to see whether or not us, well, firstly as a faculty, were offering degree programs that allowed us to be competitive, but specifically in terms of the content and specifically in terms of the skills required by our graduates in a world that is entering the so-called fourth industrial revolution. Now, obviously, COVID hit it in this time as well, and before we submitted it for publication, we incorporated the COVID dynamic into the paper as well. So, as a whole, the study focused on the impact of disruption in the broader sense. You got your typical agenda. I'm not going to harp on that. So as I mentioned, the impact of this disruptive environment is increasingly important for universities. How do we compare not only in terms of how we offer online content and face-to-face content, etc., but also in terms of obviously what we offer. So that was the focus. We thought a lot about how we should find out how competitive we are and how we compare. And we looked at our counterpart, or our competitors in the South African context, and we identified a few, 5 or 6 universities in the South African context. But we also decided just to get a flavor of how the so-called top-tier universities in the world incorporate these 4IR skills-related content in their curricula. So we identified universities such as the MITs of the world, the Cambridges of the world, etc. So I'll give a nice overview of that in a second. But it's important to, as you all know, I mean, I'm speaking to those of you who are obviously well-versed in this world of tech and this world of the fourth industrial revolution and what that brings to the party. And obviously, COVID has just magnified and expedited this whole process. This disruptive environment has made us get to where we thought it would be maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 years from now. We've been forced to adopt this world of technology and how it's integrated into our personal lives at a much quicker rate. Notwithstanding that's obviously the case in the higher education space. So, as speaking on behalf of universities, we had, especially those of us who are predominantly or are residential universities like what we are, University of Free State, face-to-face contact. We use online platforms such as Blackboard, where we disseminate or we give our online content. We have, for example, quizzes. We have provide all our material thereon, and we have online chats here and there. We have online discussion sessions, but never to the extent, as you can imagine, where we had to literally become a online university in the space of probably 2 weeks. We had to adapt all our curricula in terms of how we assess, in terms of not only how, but what we assess. And that had many challenges. The first 3-4 months of this was indeed a massive challenge, like it was to all of us in any field, as you can imagine. So this raised many questions in terms of how we do what we do and why we do what we do. Not only on the back of the 4IR, which has had a sort of runway or introduction to us, or it's been part of the narrative for a few years already, but COVID really thrust us into this environment at a huge rate. So dramatic change is inevitable, and what that implies is an increasingly flexible working environment, especially with the integration of technology and the way that we are expected to interact with each other, the way we expect to do business, the opportunities that technology brings, et cetera, et cetera. We as universities had to be responsible. We have to be responsive to this. If we are not, we run the risk of becoming archaic. We run the risk of becoming irrelevant. So the challenge that we face, and any of you that are in the academic environment, I'm sure you'll agree with me, to adapt curricula is not just a case of doing it on the Monday and having it done by the Friday. It is an extremely laborious process that has many box tick exercise that requires a lot of steps, a lot of information, and it takes time. So the challenge we sit is, how do we respond to this world that is becoming increasingly flexible, while at the same time ensuring that we can stay flexible through the way that we interact with our students, but also importantly in terms of what we offer in our curriculum. Now, we all know that we have challenges in our higher education environment and primary and secondary schooling environment. I've got a few statistics there that I think make my eyes water when I read them. I'm sure for many of you it will as well. Scary, not to say at the least. For example, if you look, 78% of grade 4 learners can't read for meaning. 79% of grade 6 maths teachers have subject content level lower than that of the grade 6 learners which they teach themselves. Scary. We are consistently rated, the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report rated right at the bottom, normally in the bottom 5 or 6, in terms of your typical mathematics, quality of mathematics teaching, etc. Now, entering a world of 4IR where the typical STEM subjects, or sometimes they include the A STEAM, science, technology, education, or engineering, art, and mathematics, these are real problems in a world that is going to be arguably dominated by these sorts of skills. And by no means am I saying that you can't be part of this world of technology, this world of the 4IR if you are an engineer, if you are a mathematics buff. By no means am I saying that. I think one thing that's not what the study intends to say. What I think we should realize is that technology does bring with it opportunities for the average person, by creating new markets, for example, by allowing them to disseminate their skills. If you think of platforms like YouTube, you all know people leave their jobs to become content creators. Facebook, Instagram, all these platforms are allowing that opportunity. So in the South African context, given this background, the president has made a few commitments. The Department of Basic Education is also, in terms of integrating robotics, computer skills, coding, etc., which is fine. I always tell the story of me going to a school here on the outskirts of Bloemfontein, and it was a fundraising initiative, and the school teacher, the headmaster, took us to one of the storerooms, and there were, I do not lie to you, maybe 100, 200 tablets in their boxes, lying with dust on them that were not being used. And I asked, but why aren't you using this in your teaching environment? And the answer came that we were given these tablets, but we weren't trained as to how we can use them in the teaching space. So it's one thing providing the devices. It's another thing in enabling and empowering that should be kept in mind. So we have structural concerns. Renita, I think I have 20 minutes, right? So I think I'll just keep my time. We have structural concerns, and we need to readily allow ourselves to adapt speedily to this, which is a challenge by itself. Now, I've really given the highlights of the paper. At the end of the presentation, there is a link that you can click on to go to the paper itself. You're welcome to read it. I'm not going to go into the actual detail of what, for example, the Harvards, here you can see the university, we looked at the Harvards, the Stanfords, the MITs, the Oxfords, the Cambridge. We looked at UCT, WITS, Stellenbosch, UJ, Pretoria, and then ourselves as well, just to compare, and took highlights out of that in the curricula, specifically important to understand or to take note of, in the Economic and Management Sciences. So it's your typical BCom degrees and or other degrees in Economic and Management Sciences, which have a focus on content or or partly focus on content that is related to 4IR. So just to explain what we define as 4IR content, modules that deal with topics within the curricula that in their broader sense are expected those to deal with 4IR. Generally speaking, this includes, but is not necessarily limited to, modules or section, or typically not sections, but specific modules within the degree related to data science, business analytics, and fintech in a more specialized sense. But in more specifically, we are looking at technology, the management analysis of data, coding, programming, simulation, digitalization, machine learning, robotics, big data, all the buzzwords, all the words you would expect in any conference or any paper or any discussion when you talk about the typical 4IR environment. So you're welcome to go look at the paper itself to get more detail on that. So what I've highlighted is, and as I mentioned, please, if you want to see what the universities themselves do, you're welcome to go look at the paper. But there are 6 main findings and implications of this study. And in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on that. The first important one is that we all know, and we're still sitting in this environment, basically, or largely, with the 4th wave looming. I mean, I saw the figures this morning, 100% increase from yesterday. It's astonishing. With universities now talking about going back to campus next year, at least we are, talking about going back on a timetable sort of basis. But the question is still, the issue is still, there will be an increasing demand for an online presence. And we know this, specifically for 3 reasons that we highlight. We need to ensure that we stay competitive, because the online space is extremely competitive, and I'll highlight a few things in a moment. From a labor and physical resource point of view, it also provides a potential additional revenue stream, especially if you are considering offering degrees in the online space, which in our faculty at the very least, we don't do at the moment. Well, specifically in my department, excluding our business school. Our business school does offer online opportunity. But that is a discussion that needs to be had, whether or not that should be part and parcel of a typical offer. And then, of course, continuity. And not only in terms of COVID, but also in terms of, for example, you can think back a few years, the fees must fall hashtag movement, and the unpaid NSFAS schemes or allowances early next year. If you can remember that, it seems like an age ago, but that's all disruption. So in the name of disruption, what technology does is, and online presence is, it does allow for continuity. Assuming ESCOM is on, of course, that's the consideration we need to keep in the back of our minds also. And then, of course, the integration of STEM subjects is important for curricula. I think in most part, at least the university we looked at, there was a good balance between your typical expected modules that had mathematics or statistics content, which is required for a commerce degree, especially if you look in my field, economics and finance. But we need to also keep in mind that the behavior and technological habits of students are changing. And in the South African context, it's not only about that, it's about the access to devices. Given the socioeconomic constraints facing a large percentage of our student base. An interesting finding that we concluded was that it's not necessarily required that there must be a mass overhaul of curricula. In other words, it doesn't mean that we need to chop and change and be everything to everyone in your typical BCom degree. By no means. What we found is that a lot of the universities add modules to your typical BCom in economics or BCom in finance or BCom in IT or whatever, or accounting, whatever, but they still keep the core of what the content, which you would expect. However, there are offerings which are almost standalone in the sense that they are related to 4IR in some way. Maybe we offer, for example, a business and financial analytics degree. I know that UJ offers a few of those offerings. So there is room for a specialized degree per se, but your general BComs, etc., we cannot leave them the way they used to. There has to be some add-on in terms of the typical skills and the content required for graduates entering the world of work in a 4-hour context. So the proposal is that there needs not be a mass overhaul of typical curricula, but there must be some flexibility built into the selection of modules. I think that'll become an increasingly important dynamic in how we as the higher education world stay relevant. That option of selection, that option of choice, that option of flexibility. Fourthly, and there's 6 of them, so we're almost done. Due to the pervasiveness of online content, I think reputation is going to be extremely important. In terms of, you can even make it more practical in terms of the rankings of universities. That might become a important factor driving the marketing of programs, the credibility of institutions. And why I say this, why we said it, is because we know that the online space is offering a lot of opportunity to learn. You can look at YouTube. YouTube, they call it you all know, the poor man's university. I have many times, if I don't understand anything, I go to YouTube, and there are many videos that allow me to just sharpen up my skills, for example. Your massive open online courses, your MOOCs, you have universities that are top tier universities attaching themselves to this, offering micro master degrees. I see now they're offering micro bachelor degrees. So you might have a master degree with, say, 12 modules or 15 modules, and they give you access to 3 modules on the MOOCs, and then you get credit for those 3 when you formally enter the program. These are threats to your universities that don't enter this space. So I think reputation, and especially the fact that your South African universities now, and all over the world now, are competing with the top tier universities, competing with our students that be sitting in a little city like Bloemfontein. There's no need to go to the online, to the face-to-face university anymore. You can do a degree through Georgia Tech. You can do a degree through short courses through the Harvards of the world, the MITs of the world. That's a very real threat that technology brings to the fore that we need to keep in mind if you want to stay relevant. Fifthly, it's our view that there should be a mandatory course in ethics in all degrees in economic and management science, if not every single day on campus. What we did find is that the majority of degrees that are focused on or that are accredited by international bodies have your ethics degrees, ethics courses, but not necessarily your typical BComs across the And that doesn't send out the right signal. If you are sending out students in a world that has technology that is being integrated into the way we do our work, the way we behave as human beings, the issue of data security, the issue of confidentiality, etc., it's a no-brainer. Ethics needs to be part of this, which in our findings does not necessarily seem to be the case across the board. And then lastly, we need to ensure that we skill our graduates with skills that the robots, our generic term for technology, and maybe taking it from your iRobot and your Terminator movies. But we need to ensure that we skill our graduates with those skills that the robots don't have. You know, we talk about the ability to problem solve. And I know those of you, I mean, I don't want to enter your space, you know more about this, a lot more than what I would. The robots at the moment can't problem solve, think critically, behave with empathy, be creative, or question or dream. And I'm sure many of you say, yes, not yet. So this 30 seconds, this environment of lifelong learning is crucial. So as the custodians of disseminating information, it's important that we don't compete directly with the Harvards of the world, but we incorporate what our needs are in a South African context, in the 4-hour context, in the technology space. And I think this will be a key differentiator in terms of we as South African universities differentiating ourselves from the rest of the world. Renier, I rushed the last part there, but I'm done.
Oh, thank you very much. What a fascinating talk. I mean, and it fits quite strongly with the future requirements that the South African NREN has, that we will have to be able to cater the additional bandwidth and the different type of protocols that will be required by the universities and the students to fit into this new world. So I just have a quick question, two questions. So the first is, you mentioned in the beginning that we had to jump 5 years ahead because of COVID. So you felt that that change was already on the way. It was just a bit, we were forced to do it a bit faster?
Right, absolutely. I think what caught us off guard was, well, I think there were two sides. On the one hand, we knew that we had to be flexible. We knew that we had to integrate technology a lot more in the way that we taught. I mean, I always tell the story that I can sit in a class and my student can Google whether or not what I'm saying is true or not. You know, literally in the class right there. And they can, and very quickly within the space of a minute, he or she can send the fact that I'm talking rubbish on a WhatsApp group, and I lose credibility in that whole class in the space of a minute. Now, that wasn't the case when I was a student. I mean, you believed everything your professors said, right? So technology has opened this world, has cracked this whole world of the availability of information literally at the, well, not a click of the button, it's the touch of a, I'm trying to sound like the techies here. I know my brother's a techie and he always laughs at me, but it's literally at the fingerprint, right? The touch of a fingerprint. So we knew this was coming, and we knew we had to be a lot more adaptive, but I think we sort of, in a way, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all universities by no means, but, and not necessarily us per se, but we didn't realize how, firstly, how quickly we could adapt, and that if you're forced into the situation, you can actually do quite well. But there are still challenges, and I think the biggest challenge, and I'm sure all of those professors on your panel, your presenters, will agree with me, the biggest challenge we face is with assessment. And I think that's one thing that we will have to look at. But I mean, assuming we come back to a face-to-face environment, hopefully we can deal with that. Well, it doesn't stay such an issue as what it is at the moment.
The second question actually follows up on it. So you talked about reputation. And I sort of started thinking about every restaurant you go, every business you go, if you Google them, you get 1 to 5 star rating. And I know that websites like Write Your Professor is becoming popular. And so do you foresee that universities will also get this 5-star rating from students and even academia too? And that will be a more important choice in the future.
Well, I think the reputation will become increasingly more important, especially if the more reputable universities are able to scale and are able to offer what they offer, which would probably traditionally have been more expensive, but they can offer it in a more affordable package. So I think that in the online space, everything is about rankings. It's all about perceptions. It's all about who's the best, who's the fastest, who's this. You just watch YouTube. That's the general tagline across most of the videos. What's the best camera to buy? What's the best this? What's the that? So, and I think the youth of today are in that mindset, and it's something that we, I think, as educators, need to be mindful of. That we can't, and I see it with a lot of the postgraduate students. It's always a case of, they want to get the degree, but I ask them, but now, what do you want to learn through this experience? Now, it's one thing saying you're going to have your degree at that, your master's degree, your PhD, but now I guarantee you're going to go through a lot of pain before you get that degree, and there's going to be a lot of learning that happens in the process. And I want to tell you that's the biggest lesson that you're going to learn. And for me, that's been my biggest challenge, because it's always about the end game. We talk about the takeaway generation, the immediate gratification. And in teaching and in higher education and in the university space, there's a lot of pain. I use that loosely. There's a lot of pain in the process to get the qualification. And we need to ensure that we package it in a way that doesn't discourage students, but encourages them to look forward to the joys of what getting an education actually. It's not just a case of getting a piece of paper.
Thank you very much. This was
a pleasure.
Fantastic talk, and it fits fantastic within our the domain of this conference. And don't be surprised if you ask me to talk next year again.
No problem, anytime.